Ratio! Welcome back to the Goldibots series. Bite-sized sessions designed to make automation modular, reusable and team-friendly. If this helps you build smarter, cleaner bots, give it a like and hit follow. It's going to boost visibility, it's going to grow our Goldibot community, and it'll give me the focus to keep creating these. Otherwise I'll end up talking to myself in a shed somewhere in Wales, sketching flowcharts on the back of a Greg's wrapper. Today we're designing, building and leveling up a XAML, one page at a time, until it becomes our golden standard function. Each flow adds a layer, each layer makes it smarter. This is page 1, this is our foundation, a minimal function layout that gets the job done. Login at the start, login at the end, no error handling, just a clean, happy path execution. This is the raw brick, the smartest building block in the framework. It does one thing well, which is the happy path, but it's not yet modular or team friendly. Okay, let's build that MVP. So we'll start with a sequence. We'll name it function Goldibots. First thing we're going to do is go to activities, grab a sequence. Get into the habit of naming these, because these are sources for exceptions when exceptions are thrown. First thing we're going to do is log the start. We're going to log the end. This is going to say started. This is going to say ended. Both values are hard coded. We'll set it info level, and then here we'll just check a sequence in. And that's where we'd stick in the process or the function. Let's improve this by removing the hard-coded value, and instead we'll assign it into a variable and we'll call that. So to do that, by selecting this, I've got the right scope. I'm going to create a variable. It's going to be called str workflow, WF for short. It's going to be a string because it's going to hold a string, and the scope is Goldibots because I've selected there. You can also change your scope here, but we'll get into that later on. Now what we need to do is drag in an assign. And we'll assign our workflow. That log is going to say that. This log will say this. And we're going to assign function Goldibots in that value. This should now match our original design. Let's run it. So the output. So we log the start, we log the end. We did something in the middle. There's nothing there at the moment, but we just did the happy path. Let's mature this. We don't have to keep hard coding this into our code, because if we do something like this, which often happens, I would have to go through each one of my code and change all that. So let's make this dynamic. To do that, we're going to use an activity called get current info. Let's make our code nice. Start with a sequence. The sequence is going to get, we can still use that variable, but we're going to assign something into it dynamically. So this sequence is going to be called start log and get XAML name. Oh, if I can spell. So look for here is get current job info. Now we can start using shortcut keys now, because this will have properties, and at the moment the output has got a container there, but there's no variable in it. By clicking Control and K, it will automatically make the right type. So I'm just going to do that. It'll put it in the scope that it's in, so it's inside start and log and get XAML name, which is again why it's important to name these. You can see which scope things are in, because we only want it there. And we're going to drag this assign up. It's not going to move that workflow because that's already in the scope of the whole thing, so it doesn't matter. But instead of hard coding that now, I'm going to use that job variable, because it's press control and space. It's IntelliSense. This is why you start your variables with what they are, because my list of all my same types would come up there, like STRs would all be listed. That's what I want. What do I want of that? I want the workflow name. That's going to be assigned into there. That's going to be used there and there. Most functions will have some arguments coming in, which means it's passed some data. That data is then used within this function to perform the task. Now, there's nothing worse than getting all the way down to perform a task and you get the dreaded error, object instance not set to a value of an object. It's because you haven't checked that the arguments are set. So let's do that first. And again with this, now this is my start and get XAML file name, so I can put them all together, clean it up, and I can start minimizing these. So they're shrinking. It's my log ends, so it starts looking nice. Right, let's switch back to the design to see where we are. So we've just updated to get the name of the XAML file dynamically. So the next thing we're going to check now, have we got valid arguments, which can be passed into the function. So this is a template, so at the moment we haven't got any, but we're going to build this in ready for future. So bear with me. So we're going to use an if to see if they're invalid. So we're going to name it if args invalid, then I'm going to check a sequence in, and on this side we're going to throw an exception. So this is going to be invalid args exception. So this is we're going to use now another variable called to hold our exception values in, because we're going to use it throughout. So let's click on the scope, create a new variable. This one we're going to call exception. So inside here we can now assign something into that. Come on. So str exception is a system exception, bad args in, and again we can use our other variable for the workflow. So when it throws, we can see exactly what workflow we're throwing. And now we've got to throw it. To do that, we've got to look for the throw activity. So now we're going to throw exception. Exception we're going to throw. Let's go into the properties. Oh, let's type in here. New system dot exception, and then we put our exception in there. Like I said, control and space. If you just start with str now, because we've got two, but control and space, everything we start with str I can do will pop up, look. But I want to throw the exception. So that's going to happen now. So let's test this by setting it true and give it a run. So as expected, start log and then showing the exception as per the design. So we've done the start log, we've got invalid args true, so we've hit and thrown this exception, which is now dynamic. It holds the value of the workflow we're running and where in the workflow it fell over because of bad arguments. Okay, let's improve this now on the else side. So we're going to drag in a sequence, and this one we're going to call normalize validate. If I could spell, let's annotate this. Construct from the args in. So on this side, this is now where if we've got an argument coming in which is say a file path, on this side we could check the file path exists before we carry on, and again we can handle that and throw a nice error rather than later on when it's trying to get that file in this process part, you'll get an error saying could not find file, or you could get a weird error which is unrelated because you haven't caught it and normalized it at the top there. Right, back to the flow to see what's next. So we've dynamically created and logged our file name. We're using that log in our exception when we throw if we've got any bad arguments in. We've set up both sides of that if statement, this decision here, for the false and the true side. So now let's build in this catch around whatever we're going to try in this function. And to achieve that in UI path is quite simple. We just right click and we surround with a try catch. So we're going to try task catch throw error. So that's where your task is going to sit when we eventually use this function. And we're going to add a catch. It's going to be a system exception, and again, so in here we're going to assign our str exception because we've already got that variable ready. There it is. Let's grab him. As I said, get in the habit of naming these as you go in. So let's have a look at the flow quickly. So we want to throw se failed on source because message in function x. So how do we do that? Because we're in a catch of an exception, we can use exception dot, and you can see there's lots of things in use from it, but we're going to use the message, which is going to give us the actual error. We're going to use exception source space exception dot source, and let's open this up and type in that message. So we got se failed at source, and we'll put the source there, and then because don't forget the spaces, otherwise all these will just merge into one big string, because error message, and then we can add, as we've done in the other ones, our STR workflow, so we always know where we are. And again, what we need to do here is throw, come on, so I'm going to throw my STR exception, which is going to be new, system dot exception control space, open brackets, and what I've just assigned is my exception. So that will now throw a nice exception if anything fails in there. And don't worry about different types of exceptions at the moment, this will catch everything. That's a nice email constructed from the exception that's been caught and rethrown again. So let's test this with a check true. What this is going to do, if it's set false, it will throw an error we set here. So I'm just going to call this testing. Check true. This is going to be the source, so let's call this 1, 2, 3, 4 to show you. Okay, let's check this. So we've got no arguments because this is a template, so this should be false, as they can never be invalid if we haven't got any at the moment. Check true is going to throw that. I just want to double check this. Oh, I said in here. Oh, it's not. Try exception dot stack trace. So I haven't even say you build these templates once you forget. Let's try that. Come on. And we're off. So again, that doesn't look very clear. Look at the mess. Let's clean that up. Cancel that. Stop that. Let's add a variable. I'm going to click on the full scope. Add new variable. str source. And what I'm going to do is in here I'm going to assign come on str source interaction, and in this let's amend this, take that out, and we put a source in. Okay, let's get that a play. So we've got sort of a precondition. Now let's take these things out, put into throw, clean it up, and now let's have a look at our flow again. So again, start, dynamic log, checking how args are valid. If they're not valid, we're trying to do the task. If the task fails, we're catching it and we're throwing a nice clean error with the name of the workflow. Let's zoom in on this. So you've got the same as you had before, but this time we've got a test harness, so we can give it arguments and test this whole XAML individually to get past this argument test. And we've also got a post condition check. So whatever is happening there in the function, in the task, sometimes you might want to pass out a value, an element exists, a window's popped up, anything, but then that's how then you trigger this, which will then throw a nice post condition. With the test harness, we just enable or disable it by right clicking on it. I'll show you, but we always start it off with this warning log, because if this is running in live in your production, then you're overwriting whatever you're passing in, because this is going to hard code them. So let's get back to the process. So what we need now is a sequence, keep things neat, and this is always going to come after your start log. Let's call it test harness, if I could spell. And we're going to put a log in here. We're going to call it log test harness. I'm going to copy that. Right, message is going to be this and stand out. And log level is going to be a warning. Now later on when we use this function, we'll start assigning hard coding arguments in here just to test this single piece when it becomes its function to perform a task. But for now, it's just a test harness. So simply right click and disable it. But let me just run it for you to show you how it will stand out. I'm going to put a breakpoint on this. I'm going to enable this one. Enable activity. I'm just going to press play. This breakpoint will stop it. When you run in debug mode, whenever these breakpoints will stop and you've got to press play to continue. You can use shortcut keys F9, F10 to step over. But there you go. You can see it's different color. It's warning. Let's just be crystal clear with this. Let's add the workflow name. So end the string. Add your workflow. There we go. And disable that. And the last thing to add was the post condition. So it's very much like the start. The if arg's valid, we're going to use an if. This time, come on. Met. So until we need it, we're just going to set this true. Post condition is met, it's going to end. Otherwise, oh, I put that in the wrong place. End is the last thing I should be doing. The post condition met, true, so it's always going to meet it. Else, let's pinch the exception from, yep, the whole thing. Let's take that. And so if it's true, it's going to go that way. If it's false, it's going to go this way. So instead of invalid args, it's failed. Post condition, exception. Do it again. Failed post condition and your workflow name. Okay, so that's looking like our flow chart now. You got a dynamic name, you got a test harness. We're checking our arguments are valid before we carry on. Once they're in, we normalize them. We'll get onto that later on when we start using this function template. We try and perform a task. Again, we'll go through sorts of tasks and things we can do in there later on. But if that doesn't work, it throws an exception, this nice one. And then at the very end, we've got a post condition ready that we can set by passing something out of there. And as we would expect on a happy path, it'll give you the ended log, then it stops. That's the end of that XAML file. So we can see how this has evolved from an MVP, the log, the start log, the end, and just do something. We evolved that into dynamically getting the name. Oh, I've skipped too far. try catch around where we're performing it. We're checking the args are in. We're throwing a nicer, cleaner error there. On the next screen then, we're adding a test harness. And on the final screen, we're adding a post condition. This is now the Goldibots function template. This will be used throughout these sessions. So this is the low level brick. Now wherever we use this function throughout, we just copy and paste the XAML into a project, and then we just update arguments, and then we actually build out our clicks, reads, writes, wherever we're doing in this part of the process. But there it is. We can now run it from start to end. And if you look at the output, so all we've got is a start and then log, because it's not doing anything. That took surprisingly long time to record all that and stitch that together. I was going to build my component part next, which is the gets the brains behind it all. Yeah, stick around there for the next sessions. I'll build some examples using this template now. This is the hard bit. So your homework is to build this. Once you've got this, we can build out functions together then tomorrow to show you how it's used and how all the error handling is taken care of. We haven't got to worry about anything. These are all nicely logged. They're all dynamic. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Hit like and follow, and I'll see you in the next session.